Well, so my name is Tom Tresser. I'm based in Chicago, where I am a civic educator and public defender. So that's a term in America that usually refers to a person who works to help defend people in the courts who don't have any money. But that's
Okay.
not what I mean. I mean the word public itself is under attack across the world, and especially in America, and especially in the city where I live and work, Chicago. And it's a long story, but it's a political story that we see across the globe, where the private sector is essentially taking over the public sector and monetizing it for their profit. And along the way, they're sort of degrading the very idea of government itself and making people either suspicious of or actual hateful of their own governments. And I just heard this morning that there's a very right-wing politician in Argentina who's potentially the next president, and he wants to do away with the free universities and the free healthcare there, and to sort of get government off people's backs. And the people are going to buy it, just like they bought Trump here. And what's behind that, I think, is very nefarious, and I think it's evil, um, and and requires, um, a careful study and organizing. And I hope that this is something that you and your smart cities people over the University of Barcelona, because Barcelona itself is a radical city, isn't it? Isn't the mayor
Yes,
there a
very much
former
so.
activist? It's a
Yeah,
rebel
yeah,
city, isn't it?
yes,
Okay, well, learn from what is going on in Barcelona, Claudio, because that is the not the norm. The norm is what's happened in Chicago, where they elect people, or other places in America where they elect mayors who used to be real estate brokers or big
yeah,
business people, and they present those credentials, well, as President Trump did, as a very successful businessman. That's why you need to elect me to run for whatever mayor or governor or even president of the United States. And these people are not the people we want running our governments. Government is not for
yeah,
profit, shouldn't be about profit. But that's an essential issue that is at the base of all my work and what makes me angry and motivated to do what I do. But unless we are
yes,
aware of those things, we could be diddling in the weeds, bringing people to a meeting that's completely a sham meeting. So don't be fooled by a city government or a county government or even a national government that talks about transparency, and we want to hear from you.
mhm,
So there is something called the ladder of participation that I urge you to look up. A
yeah,
ladder of participation, which basically talks about how people are involved in public life, um, sort of on a rungs, moving up the ladder. The lowest rung is where the people just hear about something. They're not participant. They're just an audience, right? And they hear that a law is going to be passed, a program is going to be passed, and it's basically a press release. So the government or the mayor or whoever says, we're going to do this. So here's a press release.
yeah,
Read it. And you may understand it, you may not. I'm not really interested. The next thing is, um, I want some feedback. Here's the press release. What do you think about it? I'm not saying I'm going to listen to you. I'm not
yeah,
required to listen to you. It's not like I have to listen to you. And if you really hate this idea, I'm not promising to undo it. I'm just listening. The next level up is more consultative. Before I send the press release out, I'm meeting with people and I'm guided by them, but I'm still in control. So I promise to listen, and I do listen, but it's still me. Now, further up the ladder is the people actually are controlling the situation. They are
mhm,
doing the thinking and creating, and the government is responding and agreeing to participate, almost as equals. And most of the participatory things I see are way down the bottom of that ladder.
yeah,
So don't be a party to sham meetings and one-way conversations, or what I call window dressings. And many cities have a lot of programs that require public meetings, but it's just something to check off. They're not required to do anything. That I mean, it's often a person can maybe have a minute to speak,
Yeah.
and just have to listen to them. Like, it's like, is this thing over yet? And then when the last person has spoken, they go, "Thank you very much," and they move on.
Yeah.
So I've been fighting that kind of stuff here in Chicago. I'm probably best known for my opposition to the Chicago Olympics.
Okay.
Mayor Daley, Mayor Richard M. Daley, attempted to bring the Olympics to Chicago, the 2016 Olympics,
Hmm.
and we opposed. A group was called No Games Chicago, and we opposed it, and we defeated that bid. So I'm against privatization. I'm for
Yeah.
grassroots democracy, and
Hmm.
I believe that people have a lot more knowledge and wisdom than they're giving credit for. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll put into the chat, um, some of this background stuff. So here,
Thank you.
you know,
Yes, I was seeing some of this when I found you online, and one of the aspects that you mentioned now that I think is most interesting, or at least one of them, based on the research that we're doing, is your awareness piece. I think that you talked about the fact that the government wants to make people aware, but they're not doing it in the right way. It's like they're just telling them what's happening, but they're not really involving them in the process. In your experience, how do you think that this can be fixed? Is there a way from your work that you see a sort of improvement that can be enacted, or how can we kind of get out of this current system?
well, um, I teach civics. I mean, I've been teaching civic engagement for 40 years, and it's a perpetual question because we're not taught civics really, in school in America. So you may or may not know how to read a budget. I don't know. You may or may not have critical thinking skills. So how do you know that someone is lying to you? I mean, it's that basic. So if the mayor says we want to bring the Olympics to Chicago in 7 years, and there's no one's going to, there will be no risk to the public. In other words, the public is not going to pay for it. That's just a lie. The facts
Yeah,
don't support that. But if people don't, so so how smart are people supposed to be? Are they all supposed to jump online to the internet and start doing research on the Olympics and look up academic studies? No, who's going to do that? I
yeah,
mean, it's a very big deal. In the Olympics, it's probably the biggest thing that can happen to a city, other than being destroyed by a forest fire or a bomb. So you might think that when the mayor says that we want to go for the Olympics, everybody might want to take a pause and go, wait a minute, is that good or bad? And how do I know it's good or bad? But it's not. It
yeah.
doesn't happen that way. So it's up to, who's it up to? So in America, and I'm sure this is true in Canada and in Spain, you might think you're elected officials. So if the mayor is proposing something big, maybe it's the city council person, because in Chicago we have 50 city council members. In Toronto, I don't know how many you have, but they're independently elected. They're the legislators. The mayor is an executive.
Yes.
So you might think, isn't it the job of the legislative body to press pause and go, well, we're not going to jump into this. We're going to have our own hearings. We're going to hire our own economists. We'll listen to the community. That's what we do. So the
Yeah.
legislators are a little closer to the people than the mayor is. So again, in Chicago, as I say, we have 50 city council members. Each council
Yeah.
district has about 40,000 people. So, that's different than a mayor of a city of 2 million. So you can actually meet your alderman, your city councilman. So they might be, you would suspect maybe they're the ones, but that's not the case. They're very corrupt. They're very stupid. They don't have a lot of power. They don't have a lot of resources. What about the newspapers?
Hmm.
So in Toronto, you've got some daily papers, as we do in Chicago, but they're all cut back. There's not a lot of staff anymore. It's a dying business. And if
Yeah.
your newspaper is a conservative one, it's pro-business, it might be not inclined to ask too many questions. And that's what happened in Chicago. Most of the major papers backed the bid and thought it was going to be great for Chicago. So the reporting was not doing their job. So the city council is not helping us in many cases, and our local media seems to be incapable of asking these very critical questions. So it's up to us. It's up to citizens, I guess, or maybe universities. That's another thing. So Chicago has obviously many great universities, but they all backed the bid too. The president of DePaul University was on the 2016 organizing committee. The president of Illinois Institute of Technology was also a member of the 2016 committee. So what's the likelihood of a major unit of DePaul doing critical studies, saying, you know what, the Olympics lose billions of dollars. They're terrible for cities. It's not going to happen. So we find, sadly, in any way in Chicago, a real lack of people, of the people who should be doing this work, informing the citizens, giving them the background so they can make a good decision on something as important as an Olympic Games, which could cost $10 billion or more. So if a city does the Olympics, that is simply the biggest thing a city can do, period. Even if you built a new subway line, in the heart of Toronto, it's not going to be $10 billion. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Anyway, so we need the foundation world, we need the nonprofit worlds to step up and do the work that for some reason our government isn't doing and our academics aren't doing and our media's doing. And that's the role of the Civic Lab. I've done 223 public meetings on civic finance. We published the book, Chicago is Not Broke.
Yeah.
Funding the City We Deserve.
Yes.
And it's a piece of popular education. It's designed to be read, on the train going home. It's got a lot of,
charts. Yes.
And again, it's an easy read, but still you got to want to read it.
Of course.
And so we've been invited into community hundreds of times, and we do these little workshops that explain these concepts of public finance and civics, and basically saying, our leaders are not being honest with us. And so the other thing that's kind of happening in the background here is the dominance of neoliberal thinking, the dominance of neoliberal or marketplace frames. So the University of Chicago is a very powerful institution here in the city, and they teach the market can do no wrong. Their business school has about 20 Nobel Prize winners, and the concept of the marketplace obviously is not just an American thing, it's a global phenomenon of capitalism, but it sneaks into a lot of our thinking without really being aware of it. And so part of what we fight against is a neoliberal construct that says a city government is about profits. We have to run our government like a business. That's completely wrong. And if you accept that frame, then everything else falls into place and we're going down a path to disaster. So in Chicago, what passes for planning, if you're thinking about how to make our city better, how to make people healthier and more prosperous, it's all about doing real estate deals. So that's how we measure, if we're making progress. Is there a new construction happening, or is a new apartment building or office building? And a lot of those are asking for public subsidies, which I oppose. So if you see every problem like a hammer with a nail, you're like a carpenter. I mean, then everything is a hammer and a nail, and we're saying stop that thinking. And that's part of our mission. That's part of what we try to do when we talk to people. We ask people in the neighborhoods, how's life like here? Do you have what you need? And we don't say any more than that. And then we can ask other questions like, do you have children in public schools?
Mm-hmm.
Do you use the public transportation system, or do you need it? And of course, people will be saying, yeah, I need it to get to work. So we say, well, imagine if there were no buses or subways. Imagine if there was no public schools. Imagine if there were no parks or beaches. Who here loves the public library? You know, you don't have a lot of money, you need to go to the library.
Yeah.
So imagine a world without all those things. And by the way, did you take a shit today? Did you drink any water today? Well, that's public. And what
Exactly.
I'm trying to say to people, those are the things that make a city great.
Yes.
And when you restrict access to them or sell them for profit, that is horrible policy. But the
Yes.
neoliberals will say all that is good business. You know, maybe you know, Bill Gates should run you know, the national park system because he's so smart. You know, it would be $20 a person to get in, but then you know, Bill Gates is look how much money
Yeah.
he's made. You know, so let's just sell the national parks, you know, Grand
Yeah.
Canyon to Bill Gates and let him take care of it.
It'd
That's
be terrible, of course.
that's where we're going in America, and
Yeah.
and we see in other places even water systems. The way we drink water, the way water is piped into homes, is being sold to private companies, which is actually a civil rights violation. It's a human rights violation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the long answer is we have to design and participate, and maybe your university can help think of ways to do this, where activists reach into the community and help people understand local government on their own terms. So we help people understand the budgets.
Yes. Okay.
That's important to us. We feel like if people can really understand how public money moves, they really can't be lied to or chumped. You know,
Yeah.
to be told, I'm sorry, Claudio, I know you want a public clinic. There's a lot of COVID in your community, and you have people of modest means that don't have a lot of money. A lot of people in your community don't have health insurance. And I know you guys are organizing to get a clinic, a public health clinic that you can go to. We don't have any money. Sorry. So Claudio says,
Yeah.
well, we met with Mr. Tresser and he was very sympathetic, but he says we don't have any money. So what do we do, compadres? Well, usually nothing happens.
Yeah.
So we're trying to
Yeah.
say to organizers and activists and people who are trying to get more things for the community, get smart about the money.
Yes. Okay. And so I think that the financial aspect seems very important, probably one of the foundational aspects. Would you say that education in general is one of the first steps for people to take, or is there something else for communities to first have to learn or get on board with before they even jump into the education?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've been thinking a lot about that lately. So again, the word public comes to mind. Uh, I think you might find some interest in convening a public meeting or even a discussion amongst your fellow students about what do we make of the word public. Let's have a conversation about that word. What does it mean to you? When I say public, what do you think of?
Hmm.
And are we smart as students of as policy? You know, you're going to presumably go into some field of planning or I don't know, nonprofit management, or maybe you're going to go work for a city government, maybe. And I feel like that's a foundational piece of understanding. And I think your job, in my opinion, is to champion public. Your job
Okay.
as a future professional is you got to make people get what that public is all about. Because I don't think they get it. I think the Republican Party and conservatives in America and abroad have purposely sullied the well, have poisoned the well on purpose for 50 years so that people all around the globe are suspicious of government. Now, we have corruption, and I know that is also a problem when you have the wrong people leading. It makes people suspicious of government. Like, you know, Chicago, we have a very corrupt local government. They're trying to, you know, we have a reform mayor now who just got elected.
Hmm.
But for a long time, Chicago was known as the most corrupt city in America. So
Yeah.
my argument is I am for government, though some governors should be put in jail, if you follow me. So we need the right people leading us, you know, in whether they're a mayor or a city councilman. or the commissioner of planning, or whatever, whatever public role that you might want to think of, that person must be what I call a servant leader.
Yeah.
So you can look that up. But servant leadership is a certain kind of leader that is very studied and often talked about in the world of service and nonprofits. I'll put that in the chat as well.
Thank you. Yes, I'm looking at that now as well. And so in all of these encounters that you've had with people in communities over time, teaching them about the principles of the city budget and finances, what would you say are some of the current community needs and priorities that people have come back to you with?
Well, it's a pretty predictable and repeatable list of priorities. So in Chicago, we have a very segregated city. So the Black and brown communities have been under-resourced and neglected for 50 to 60 years. So it doesn't look like a white community. There's not a lot of, say, fresh food or like a supermarket. So sometimes people, or the schools look different than the schools in the white communities. They're more crowded. They don't have the more current equipment. So sometimes it's more like, our school was actually closed. So Mayor Emanuel, Rahm Emanuel, closed 50 public schools 10 years ago. And they were mostly in brown and Black communities. And that caused huge upset as kids were forced to move into new schools. They crossed gang boundaries. I mean, there was violence. It was huge upset. And schools, public schools, are anchor institutions. They do more than obviously just train students or, for learning. They're places of democracy, leadership development, sports, recreation, parents organizations. I mean, schools are tent poles of communities, and when you take that away, you're causing the community to collapse, which is I think done on purpose. We're trying to move these Black people out of here and take their land because the white developers want their land. So what was the question again?
The priorities for communities, like what's needed most with the communities that you've been engaging with.
So in the case where the school was closed, reopen my school. Why did you close it? Or if the school has not been closed, cut the class size down. So instead of 30 kids or 35 kids, just put 20 kids in a classroom. That's a very simple thing to, and we know that will have a great impact on making the learning better in the school. Obviously, during COVID, people wanted more public health. They wanted public health nurses. They wanted clinics. They wanted the masks and other gear, and then they wanted rental assistance, because if you were a person of modest means and you were working in a supermarket, or you couldn't work from home. So again, this whole COVID across the world impacted Black and brown people 5-1 over whites. Poor people got sicker faster. Obviously, they didn't have health care. They didn't have it before COVID. They don't have it now. So that exacerbated the racial disparities and economic disparities in Chicago and many places around America. So more public stuff is basically what we're hearing. Give us more public goods, like whatever the best neighborhood in Chicago looks like, with parks and beautiful schools, and access to healthcare. That's what we want.
Yeah,
it comes up over and over again. The other one is jobs. We need jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it seems like they're basically asking for equality almost, that these minorities are just trying to be and feel equal like everyone else and have the same access to services and basic needs, so that they don't have to suffer constantly, which I think is very much a human rights issue even.
Yeah. So all you have to do is look at the charts on any measure. If you pick Chicago or America, on racial disparities in income, household wealth, job graduation, graduation from school, employment, home ownership, longevity of life. There's huge racial disparities. Huge, and they're getting worse. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we this is a long issue in Chicago. It's like we have two Chicagos. You know, that's a long-standing issue, and we speak directly to that in our work.
Yeah, and that's super important. Now, are these communities also interested in feeling more engaged? I'm wondering, do they even have time to be engaged, or are they so busy with their day-to-day just making ends meet that they wouldn't even be able to engage further if they wanted to? Or
Well,
if they had the right tools, would they want to
well,
engage
I
with
mean,
their local
there's
government?
we've been called into community hundreds of times by neighbors who got angry and they wanted our information. So they got organized and motivated to bring us to a church or a community group, and then they did the outreach. So people will get motivated when the house is on fire. I mean, so we have, like I say, there's a crisis in Chicago over the last number of years. There's been a lot of police violence that sparks anger. So they shoot a black kid in the back. The school
Hmm.
is closed. Or in the case of COVID, like I say, the public health system was not up to it. And there were no nurses in our public schools, even to this day. So those crises called people into action, and they know that we have this information about
Okay.
finances, and so they reached out to us. But there is a lot of cynicism. I mean, our voter participation rate for the mayor's race that just happened in February of this year was about 35%. So that means,
Only.
yeah, that means like 60% or more of the people stayed home and didn't vote. So that tells you that people are kind of tired and cynical.
Yeah,
And why should they come to your meeting? I mean, a lot of times the people who do these meetings are being paid, but why should I come? And I have to say that a lot of times, especially professional planning agencies that get hired by developers or other big wigs, who tend to be white professional males, but there's also some females in the business, will come into a community and do a charrette or something, and you often see images of black people putting post-it notes on a wall,
mm,
as evidence that we listen. Look how we listen. Well, I think it's abusive. So unless you're paying the people to come to the meeting, like you're
yeah,
being paid, I'm not a fan of that anymore. I'm not really a fan of that because I've seen way too much of that stuff.
yeah.
In name only. As I say, it's the lowest rung, or maybe it's the second rung on the ladder, and the consultant has to have some meetings to show the client that we listen. And in the world of development, where people are building $100 million projects, what they'll do is they'll have community meetings and they'll put the plans out that are so crazy and dense that they cause uproar. And then they'll have two or three meetings. Now, again, they're paid to come to the meetings, but the community members are just coming because they're angry. And then
Of
and then
course.
after maybe 6 months of this, the developer goes, okay, we've listened. And instead of being 100 stories, it's only 65. So look how we listened. And instead of taking up the full footprint, look, we put a plaza, and there's a park. And they were going to do that all along. So the developers,
Yeah.
use this process, this what I call dog and pony show process. And I'm very
Yeah.
cynical about it. So so unless the person pushing this, like the mayor of Barcelona or the mayor, somebody
Yeah.
very important, comes into the community personally and says, I'm here personally to listen. And maybe there's in different neighborhoods. So there's Chicago has, like I say,
Hmm.
50 council districts. So you go ward by ward, and I'm going to come into each ward in person and listen. And at the same time, I'm opening a website, uh, to discuss the matters at hand. You know,
Yes.
that has a little more credibility. You know what I mean?
Of
That
course.
maybe people might want to participate. But if it's just
Yeah.
some hack person, some low-level person doing a meeting just to have a meeting, I wouldn't blame people if they stayed away. I mean, don't
I
assume.
think that's very,
I mean, don't assume that
sorry.
what's important to you, even if you're the commissioner of planning, Claudio, you got hired by Toronto tomorrow, and you're the commissioner of planning for the city of Toronto, and there's like a big plans. They want to tear down this thing, and they want to build something on the wharf. They want to put a big stadium. I mean, things that are very serious. You want to push them, but the people, nah, you got to sell. You're selling it like, oh, come to this meeting because we're here to hear your thoughts. But what if they all say we don't want the stadium? What if they all say this is bullshit? We want more parks. Are you ready to turn to your mayor and his developer friend who gave him a bunch of campaign cash and say, you know what? I've done 5 meetings and the people don't want the stadium, mayor. We should do more parks. Then you're fired.
It's a tough call. Yes. It looks like the process is almost what leads to corruption, because it's so hard to change this existing infrastructure. I wonder though, do you think that there's a possibility to create something from the bottom up, almost say a platform or a movement that makes it impossible for who's at the top to ignore that? Say like if they actually see numbers, or if mayors or whoever else is in that team
do, Claudio. That's what we do. We bring people, you organize people to get power. But be a little suspicious of online tools because they are used a lot. Facebook, for many years, people thought by clicking like that was actually doing something. So it was actually a term called slacktivism. So you sitting in your chair at home, you're liking something, you're reposting something, you're adding some stupid comment. That doesn't do anything. So old school organizing requires people to be physically in the same place, in relationship with one another, over something they have in common. It's usually a neighborhood, so it's like it's hard to get people online from all over the city. I guess if it's a citywide issue, but I mean, the way organizing works is you start very local in a very particular place when there's a very particular problem that needs to be addressed. And then by addressing it, you're going to make people's lives better. So it's not an abstract thing. Let's all talk about ending poverty in Spain.
Of course.
What the fuck was that about? I mean, but if you told me, Tom, the school where your child goes to elementary school, there was rats in the kitchen, and the children are eating feces in their food, I'm instantly angry and I'm coming to the meeting. What are you telling me, Claudio? What is that? What did you say? What is the evidence? And you're there with other parents and you have a sample of the food and there's your child meeting my child, and we all are learning together, and we want to know how did this happen? Was this a one-time thing? Then maybe there was or no, and then other people are sharing their stories. No, Tom, this has happened many times. My older child was in the same school last year, and my other child was here 3 years ago, and it's been going on. So we're sharing knowledge, and the next thing you know, we're cooking up a solution. We're going to work together. But see that's in person. You know what I mean? I mean, if I saw a Facebook post, I'm gonna go, what? Maybe I'll type something that's outrageous, and I'll go back.
But you don't act on it afterwards.
Yeah. So part of the art and science of community organizing is, and I have a whole shelf of books here. I mean, obviously, people have been doing this for decades. There are master organizers. I teach community organizing as a class. That's part of a skill set and a discipline that you would learn. Just like you're learning other skills, to be a city planner or to be an architect or to be a policy analyst, a budget analyst. You're learning certain skills and you have certain tools, whether it's a spreadsheet or some other way to like some kind of a data dashboard that you would use in your own work. So too organizers have their tools.
Makes sense. Now I like your perspective on meeting physically, because I think it's super important. Now to look at the other perspective, I'm wondering, for this to scale, like the work that you're doing is fantastic, but you still need a group of people with you to live physically in that place to actually create the movement and help others. Do you think that there could be maybe a compromise or some other way that leverages technology to make what you're doing scalable, so that it's not just in Chicago that you can provide help to these communities, but it's actually maybe all over America or all
Well,
over the
you
world?
you
What?
see you see large movements like the Sunrise Movement. Um, it goes on and off. It goes in person and online.
Okay.
So modern movements like Black Lives Matters, the movement for gay rights and gay marriage, all had in-person organizing, rallies,
Hmm.
public rallies. But then you move online where I can get toolkits, and especially if there's a legislative campaign and you're trying to pass a specific law, or in the case of the equitable marriage, there was a referendum, in a state, that had to be passed by many people in a certain state. You might get
Hmm.
my attention by a rally in a park, or you might hold up traffic and and actually have civil disobedience, especially if there was a horrible thing like somebody was shot. So it's a Black Lives Matter thing. But then you're saying, well, we're trying to pass a new law, and this just happened in Illinois, that got rid of cash bail. So there's no more cash bail. If you break the law in Illinois, you can't be held in jail just because you don't have like $1,000,
Hmm.
unless you're a very violent person. That's a big deal. And it took a lot of people working, but there was a lot of demonstrations, there were a lot of public meetings, a lot of Zoom meetings. And then there was a
Hmm.
law, and they worked with the legislators in the Springfield. They sent things to the newspapers. It was a very long campaign coordinated by a lot of people. And I'll put that in the chat too. Uh,
Thank you.
Cash bail. Oh, yeah, here it is. I'll put this into the chat. Now, if you look these guys up
Hmm.
and read their
Okay.
material, you'll see the story of a 2 to 3 year campaign that ended successfully in a victory for civil rights and for economic justice and equity, racial justice. Because obviously, like everything else, poor folks, people of color who don't have a lot of money, they were in jail more. So someone like me, I get pulled over by the police for my whatever, and I disrespect the policeman and he takes me to jail.
Yeah.
I'm out immediately. I have a lawyer, I have money in my pocket. But the same thing happens to a black guy. He doesn't have $500. Next thing you know, he's waiting for bail. He misses his
Yeah.
work. Then he loses his car. His car gets confiscated, and next thing you know, he
Yeah.
has to declare bankruptcy. So this all
Yeah.
happens. This is for real. So
That's terrible.
so check that out. The End Money Bond Coalition. So
Yeah.
it's a combination of in person and then online organizing with toolkits. And there are, of course, companies that make these toolkits: Action Network, Every Action, Salsa Labs. Basically, anytime you get an email, asking you to do something, you see who the provider of the email is. So say you were gay and you wanted to pass an equal rights amendment in Barcelona. You get an
Okay.
email saying, "Hey, Claudio, come to the rally in the plaza. We try to pass Bill 72, in the Spanish Senate." Um, Take a
Okay.
look at who sent the email. It could be the Spanish Coalition for Equal Rights. That could be the organization, but the actual tool they're using could be something called Every Action or Salsa Labs or some
Okay.
tool set. Voter Voice is another big one in America. So those are the tools that are made. I mean, that's a profitable business, by the way.
Of course.
So those are the tool
Of
sets
course.
that you use to start a petition, you send an email to your congressman, all that stuff, send a letter to the editor, all that's loaded in the tool.
Okay.
And
Okay. It's actually very good. Sorry. Continue.
yeah, no, those are very established tool sets. I mean, there's also tools that are used obviously in politics and campaigning, for texting. So Claudio, you come to my campaign. I'm running for city council. You wanna help me get elected. You like me. You like my programs. I tell you to download the app, Call Hub, and it's on your phone, and you share with me a list of your people, or I just give you a list you sign up for, and it shows up on your phone, and you just call them one after another. And there's a script. And if the person says, I will support Tresser, you press green. And I see all the results on my master's calendar. Claudio's called
Yes.
30 people, 10 were not
Yeah.
home, 10 said they like Tresser, 5 said they hate Tresser, 5 were undecided. And when you do that, it gives you a script. And if the person says, well, I heard of this guy Tresser, can you send me something? You press the blue button and it sends me an email instantly. You don't have to do
Okay.
anything. So that's a tool.
Okay.
It's called Call Hub. It's very popular. Politicians use it quite a lot. But you can see how technology is actually helping us here. But
Yes.
it starts with the human beings.
Makes sense, of course. And it's very helpful that you showed me some of these tools because I wasn't fully aware as to how much was out there already. In fact, on a specific note, one of the aspects we were thinking of pursuing further as a prototype was a platform to have people surface issues that they're seeing in their community and almost create this bottom-up grassroots approach where, say, you see that there's a street light that's broken and it's very unsafe because then you can't see when you're driving. And so you would go on this platform and you would create that issue, and then everyone else can see what's going on.
Well, there's a pothole tool that does that. So there's this guy got written up many years ago. People take pictures of a pothole.
Yes.
And it's geocoded. It's sent right to the streets department, and
Yes.
they get real-time updates. So people started doing that on their own because they were annoyed that there are potholes that are hurting their cars, like really in front of their homes. So I'm motivated I learned about the app on the news. I read about it somehow. I downloaded the app. I took a picture of the pothole, and I got an
Yeah.
email or a text saying, "Thank you, Tom. We'll be there within 48 hours." And then when I see the actual guys come and clean the pothole, I feel really good about myself.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and and,
Now,
and that's a very positive thing. If the city does something like that.
what if that can be expanded to much more beyond potholes? What if it could be a street light? What if it could be maybe I want more parks, and then I go here, I put an idea for parks, and then other people go there, they comment, they vote it up, but everything very tied to the community environment. Do you know if that exists already,
Oh
and
yeah, there's a
or if
lot of
there's
tools. There
appetite
are a
from
lot of
people?
tools.
Okay.
Yeah, community member software, project manager software, online collaboration. Well, there's certainly a bunch of tools for online teams. That's not what you're talking about. For community planning.
What we're imagining is almost like think of Google Maps, but instead of seeing restaurants and other things that may be in a city, you see ideas created by people that are very tied to their location so that you can actually see what's going on in your neighborhood. People want a better school, maybe they want smaller roads.
Yeah, all you have to do is Google community planning software, community planning applications. I just did a search and I came up with community.com. But I know there's that's a big business, by the way.
Okay. Okay.
Because planning departments use them. I've seen them used
Okay.
here in Chicago, um, and they're very top down. But
But they exist already,
they exist.
basically.
You and your colleagues would probably want to do a thorough search. You're going to find an article somewhere that's going to review and contrast and compare the most popular ones.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Collaborative software, collaborative planning software, community input software. Use search terms like that. Uh, um, project
Okay.
voting. Because sometimes software they have what they call participatory budgeting. Yeah, that's the other thing. If you look up,
Okay.
there's a whole world about that. participatory budgeting.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
So
Now, it looks like maybe this specific aspect of community engagement is already pretty well established, at least from what I'm seeing and from what you've been able to share with me. What if instead an aspect that we can tackle could be more around the democracy, meaning what leaders are doing and giving people more insight in an easy and digestible way to help them understand what's going on so that they're better informed?
well, it's the job of our newspapers, it's the job of the media, it's the job of our schools, it's the job of the public officials themselves. I mean, a good leader is also an educator. I mean,
Yes.
should be educating the people. I mean, Franklin Roosevelt, when he was trying to push the New Deal, he had his fireside chats every Saturday night. Millions of people would sit by the radio and he would teach. He would talk about the issues of the day and he was explaining himself. That's part of the job of what leaders have to do. Um, you know, if it was the wish of a mayor, they could put their whole budget online and people could look at it line by line. You know, I mean, in Brazil, uh, there is a city, I forget which city, but if you look at participatorybudgeting.org, maybe you'll find
Yeah.
the links. But a city in Brazil had hundreds of thousands of people involved in the budget of their city. Not, and it wasn't for just like a few $1 million. It was for everything. So it
Wow.
can be done, but it requires the leader, the mayor, or whoever is the top leader to really get behind it and make it the law of the land and really sell it so people can understand why what it is you're talking about. Why do you want me to do it? And what you want me, what, like give you an hour or a week? Well, what exactly is
Yeah.
it I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to go to a local meeting by my church like once a month, and then I'll go online, lay it out for me, explain why I should do
Okay.
this. What do I get out of it?
Okay.
What's the payoff for me? Am I going to get more? I'll get more what? More parks, more what? What am I going to get? A better
Yeah.
city, but how?
Yeah.
And it's
That's
and
important.
if the mayor can explain all that and say, it's worth your time, Claudio. I'm telling you, I want you and everyone in your community to come to this one meeting at the church, and then we'll just do it online and by the radio, and I will report to everyone,
Okay.
all the citizens, every Monday, every first Monday. I'll come on TV and I'll report, and then you can always go online and see what's going on, and that would be pretty amazing. I would get my attention, and then if I saw after this kind of happened for a year, and the result was okay, people of Barcelona, we've had 1,600 meetings. 200,000 people have attended. You discussed the issues, and what we heard was this: you want 5 more parks. You want the seaside part of Barcelona that's kind of fallen apart. Everybody wanted that fixed up. You wanted more gardens, more gardens. Those are the 3 things we heard, and so now we are
Yeah.
going to deliver. So here's what we're going to do: we're going to spend $500 million on the thing, and in 5 years we're going to build more gardens. And but in order to do that, we have to raise everyone's taxes $100. So we're going to have a vote. Everyone go to your computer and give me your feedback. Who do you like?
Okay.
Which one? If we have to only do one idea, not the 3, which is your most favorite one? So now I'm going, oh fuck, that's amazing. I think I really like the parks one more than I like the harbor or the garden. So I'm going to go and vote on that.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then if he actually builds the gardens, he actually says, okay, Barcelona, we have heard you. You want 200 gardens. That's the number one thing that will solve the most problems, the most issues at hand here. And here's the plan. The first 20 gardens are going to be built in the next 3 months. Now I've seen the plan, and there's a map where all the 200 gardens are going to go in order. So I'll be patient. It's not coming to my community first. I'm actually the 3rd community. but I'm peaceful with that because I saw the whole thing unfold. I voted, and you're going to get the first your community, Claudio, which doesn't have a lot. You're going to get the first 5 gardens, and I'm good with
Hmm.
that. I'll get mine
Yeah.
later, but because I already have some things, but you don't have anything. So, and everyone's seeing this at the same time. So it's not a secret. It's not because you paid off the mayor or anything. You know what I'm saying? That process
Yeah,
is
and that's
very,
important.
the process I just described is a fantasy,
Yes.
but it
So
could happen.
maybe for my last question, because I know they only have a few minutes left, what do you think is the biggest gap that currently exists in this engagement piece?
Just okay. What you were going to say now?
For the last question, I wanted to see from you, what do you think would be the most effective way for my group and I to build something new that would solve the biggest gap? Because as we have seen, there's a lot of different platforms here and there that are helpful in their own way. What do you think would be the biggest problem or the biggest gap that currently exists that isn't being solved by a tool that would really benefit communities if it was to be implemented?
I don't really think you need to build anything. Don't waste your time. You're not going
Okay.
to build anything worthwhile. Um, I think you would do yourself a favor by just surveying the participatory tools out there. So the participatory budget community
Okay.
has been around for many, many years. They have a
Okay.
tool. The large planning operations have very expensive tools that have visualizations, that have, it sort of have mind maps that are in use.
Okay.
And then I would urge you to just do a little study of old school community organizing, which
Okay.
is very high touch patient work. Um,
Yeah.
there's no substitution for being with people in a physical space, listening to them. Now they could use whiteboards, they could use post-it notes, flip
Sure.
charts. I mean, there's ways to facilitate community meetings. I would urge you to Google um, indigenous people's public meetings. So there's
Okay.
non-traditional ways where people have public meetings and listen to one another. So have you ever heard of a peace circle?
No.
Okay, so take a look at peace circles.
Okay.
How those meetings are run are a little different than how planners run their meetings. So non-traditional, non-hierarchical meetings, which have a more feminine or indigenous feel to them, are also something worth looking into. Because again, this is very white driven, very professional driven, you know, very, people with degrees and shit. And that's only been around for a little while, but people have been making decisions, communal decisions for thousands of years.
Yes.
So peace circles, they use what they call a talking stick. You know what that is?
Yeah. No.
So a talking stick is we're in a circle and there's rules for establishing the mood of the circle, the rules of conduct in a circle. That's a whole separate discipline. But basically, you take something, an object, and people can bring an object like a stick or a something funny. Sometimes it's a teddy bear. I mean, it depends on what the meeting is about. But there's the object, and whoever's holding the object is the speaker, and no one else talks.
Okay.
And
Very respectful.
and you talk, and it usually goes around in a circle. But if someone raises their hand, then you pass them the talking stick, and then they speak. And it's
Okay.
harder than it sounds because everybody wants to hear
Yeah.
themselves talk. So
Yes.
so let's call it non-traditional facilitation
Okay.
is something that I would encourage you to look into.
Okay. Tom, thank you so much. This has been super helpful, and you taught me a lot of different aspects that we had looked into a little bit, but you made them really clear. So I really appreciate your time. And if you have 2 to 3 people that you would think we could interview just to get additional opinions, I would really appreciate that. And it
Okay.
doesn't have to be now, even
All
via
right.
email.
Well, don't forget to save the chat before I turn the meeting on.
Yes, I already saved everything. Yes, I took all of
Okay.
those links.
All right. So what I'll
Yes,
do is I will put this little video on YouTube and send you the link. Then you can share with your colleagues. All right.
definitely. Tom, thank you so much. Have
All
a
right,
great rest
Claudio. Good
of
luck
your
to you
day.
and your crew. Be safe
Thank you.
out
Yes.
there. Okay. What you were
Cheers.
going to
Thank
say
you.
now?
For the last question, I wanted to see from you, what do you think would be the most effective way for my group and I to build something new that would solve the biggest gap? Because as we have seen, there's a lot of different platforms here and there that are helpful in their own way. What do you think would be the biggest problem or the biggest gap that currently exists that isn't being solved by a tool that would really benefit communities if it was to be implemented?
I don't really think you need to build anything. Don't waste your time. You're not going
Okay.
to build anything worthwhile. Um, I think you would do yourself a favor by just surveying the participatory tools out there. So the participatory budget community has
Okay.
been around for many, many years. They have a
Okay.
tool. The large planning operations have very expensive tools that have visualizations, that have, it sort of have mind maps that are in use.
Okay.
And then I would urge you to just do a little study of old school community organizing, which
Okay.
is very high touch patient work. Um,
Yeah.
there's no substitution for being with people in a physical space, listening to them. Now they could use whiteboards, they could use post-it notes, flip
Sure.
charts. I mean, there's ways to facilitate community meetings. I would urge you to Google indigenous people's public meetings. So there's
Okay.
non-traditional ways where people have public meetings and listen to one another. So have you ever heard of a peace circle?
No.
Okay, so take a look at peace circles.
Okay.
How those meetings are run are a little different than how planners run their meetings. So non-traditional, non-hierarchical meetings, which have a more feminine or indigenous feel to them, are also something worth looking into. Because again, this is very white driven, very professional driven, you know, very, people with degrees and shit. And that's only been around for a little while, but people have been making decisions, communal decisions for thousands of years.
Yes.
So peace circles, they use what they call a talking stick. You know what that is?
Yeah. No.
So a talking stick is, we're in a circle, and there's rules for establishing the mood of the circle, the rules of conduct in a circle. That's a whole separate discipline. But basically, you take an object, and people can bring an object like a stick or something funny. Sometimes it's a teddy bear. I mean, it depends on what the meeting is about. But there's the object, and whoever's holding the object is the speaker, and no one else talks.
Okay.
And
Very
it,
respectful.
and you talk, and it usually goes around in a circle. But if someone raises their hand, then you pass them the talking stick, and then they speak. And it's
Okay.
harder than it sounds, because everybody wants to hear
Yeah.
themselves talk. So
Yes.
so let's call it non-traditional facilitation
Okay.
is something that I would encourage you to look into.
Okay. Tom, thank you so much. This has been super helpful, and you taught me a lot of different aspects that we had looked into a little bit, but you made them really clear. So I really appreciate your time. And if you have 2 to 3 people that you would think we could interview just to get additional opinions, I would really appreciate that. And it
Okay.
doesn't have to be now, even via
All right.
email.
Well, don't forget to save the chat before I turn the meeting off.
Yes, I already saved everything. Yes, I took all of
Okay.
those links.
All right. So what I'll
Yes,
do is I will put this little video on YouTube and send you the link. Then you can share with your colleagues. All right.
definitely. Tom, thank you so much. Have
All
a
right,
great rest
Claudio. Good
of your
luck to
day.
you and your crew. Be safe.
Thank you. Yes. Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.